Thanks for coming. Good to see you all here tonight. I'd like to introduce the Graystone Gallery staff. I'm Leslie Briggs, co-owner and founder of the gallery. With me tonight I have one glamorous assistant, Mark. So my husband was expected to be here tonight, but unfortunately he's ill. So please be kind to us. We have two excellent artists in conversation for you tonight, and I couldn't be more pleased. Ladies and gentlemen, Trina Bowen and Gail Olding. Trina will be Trina will be explaining about her art and her influences, and there'll be questions after. And then after the break, we'll have Gail doing the same. So please welcome Trina.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. First and foremost, I should tell you I'm probably actually just getting over a cold, so if I snuffle a bit, I'm throated with my lozenges here. First, but most importantly, I'd like to welcome Gail to Edinburgh from London.
Thank you.
Come all this way. I know what it's like. I did an exhibition in London 2 years ago. I know everything that you've just done, and you've got the festival to compete with up here as well. So thank you for making it. I also have to say that I think your paintings are a credit to this gallery. The gallery, of course, is lovely, and it's a credit to Leslie, Rob and Mark for all the work they've done, putting up the exhibition, and actually I guess just even painting the walls. But your work looks fabulous.
Thank you. As does yours.
Okay, so I didn't quite know what Q&A should look like here. I could do a kind of discussion about the interaction of colour by Joseph Elba. You know, the tomb is well worth going into if you've got some long winters and COVID, getting over business, but we won't do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you about myself. Okay, I'm a New Zealander, and I worked in graphic design. My degree took me into glass design in Christchurch, Canterbury, New Zealand, and after that, adventures took me to Papua New Guinea, where I worked in advertising. Very, very early days, where we turned advertising from European countries into making it work for developing countries. So it would be some products that everybody knows about for baby care and so forth. I had the time of my life. Papua New Guinea in those days was utterly fabulous. Making advertising, making small movies was just brilliant. I thought it was great. But life moves on, and I went to Indonesia with my husband, who was working for various companies there. I started off small, was doing small exhibitions in Jakarta. Soon after some of these exhibitions, I found that I had a lot of small commercial people looking and following what I was doing. And one of them was a ceramic design company who worked at the end of Java. So his brief was, I would like you to design for me ceramics that look Western for the Asian eye and look Asian for the Western eye, right? And when I first came back here, sometimes I could see my designs, particularly in the Netherlands, because the companies that were working there, a lot of them were Dutch in those days. Okay, so it was fun. Soon after that, I then went into children's book illustration. So I did 2 children's books, the Balinese Children's Favourite Stories and a Club of Small Men for a company in Singapore that were also working in Jakarta. After that, I kept going with small exhibitions, kept exploring ideas. In Bali, lucky me, I know, I discovered that the big temples there were full of atmosphere, the incense, the candles and so forth. So it kind of took me out of my graphic design into something I hadn't been doing, and that was learning to illustrate and trying to capture, I guess it's, what can I call it? Just the atmosphere, the smoke, the mystery of Balinese temples and so forth. Just actually walking around the temples, discovering the temples was actually fabulous, as you can imagine. So back home in Jakarta, there were the Chinese temples, that was chalk and cheese. Chinese temples are totally different. Their gods are there, right big beside the big red candles that stand this tall, and if you leave the right present, the favours will be given to you. And these huge temples that were threaded throughout Java, the big Chinese temples, they changed in each city. The influences, other old, very ancient influences showed up in the cities. You go to Yogyakarta, for example, the temple's different there to Jakarta and so forth. What can I say? I used to come home smelling of incense and get to work. And once again, this was all exhibition stuff. I was in Indonesia and I lived with my husband in Sumatra, Kalimantan, Java. So I was there a long time, about 12 years. So on and off, as my language improved as well in my head, I came upon the group called Group Simbalan, and they're an old women's artist group. Can I put it that way? Yes. And as they grew in stature, they also grew in political comment, which is no small mean feat given Indonesia in those days. Okay, and I'm very proud to say I became part of Group Simbalan, and a lot of the work was about women and violence, which then I have followed as a thread throughout the rest of my life. I found working with the Indonesian women illuminating, to say the least, and they were incredibly generous to me too, as they pushed me along. Okay. Soon after my 12 years, we then moved to Bangladesh, once again following my husband's work. So in all of the times that I moved, each time I moved, I set up and start work for myself all over again. Right? Everybody else who moves with big aid organisations or whatever, probably they gather moss as they go. Right? Mine seemed to fall off from each country, and I started again. Bangladesh was really interesting from a point of view of an outsider coming in. There was the entire aid strata, which dealt with the many, many groups that went in there, from children, poverty, medical, water, fish, just all the aid groups were there to deal with all the aspects of helping Bangladesh come into a better state themselves. That's not to say the Bangladeshis weren't there, of course they were there too. The upper echelon was, of course, the very rich who lived on and off outside of Dhaka, here in London, all over the world, fairly urbane, well-educated group of people. And I met both sets of people. The expats that come and go, if I can call them expats, Bangladeshis at this level, were great art buyers, thank you, and also everybody made space for a person like me. I was very interested in what happened between the aid and the, let's call them, the extremely well-heeled, who took care of themselves. The aid group were taking care of everybody that was in such dire circumstances. Not all of them were. There was a space for movement, and there was growth happening in Bangladesh at the same time too. I was very interested in the street traders, and the street traders sold everything. They came to door to door. They either sold you little birds, they could sell you socks, incense, absolutely everything. So when I got talking to them, I understood that they were almost a product of how aid had been successful. Yeah? On the top of aid, right, they're the new kids on the block. They were the ones that saw themselves running small businesses. There were a couple of very clever bankers, who I won't mention their names, who had actually starting to give small loans to small business people that were out there. Not necessarily these guys. A lot of the work was traditional, whatnot. So I decided that my way forward would be that I would ask a trader when I found them if they would come and work for me. Okay. Whatever they learned or whatever they earned per day, I would pay them if they would sit for me and I would paint them. Okay? So as we painted away and talked away, I understood more about their lives, understood. There was a lovely girl called Laini, and she was in her most beautiful sari, as they all turned up in saris. And she told me about her life expectation. She was 18 years old, and she had spent the entire year being groomed for marriage, and she had met her husband-to-be. She was so excited that she would be married in the next 3 or 4 months. And I met her after she was married as well. She was a delight. I met the man who sold me birds, but most of all, I met a man called Amor. Amor was a very elderly gentleman. He, as all were in Bangladesh, he was Muslim. And tragedy had befallen him. He had a wife and 3 children, and he cut rice for a living. Whilst he was away one day, his house burnt down. It burnt his wife and his 3 children. And he never ever, after that he said he didn't belong to this world at all, but he would wander the world and probably do good. He come all the way through to Dhaka, and he lived in the big main mosque where you could live if you were homeless. Half the mosque was given to women who were homeless and the other half to men at night. And then during the day, you would walk looking for money. So he came and sat for me. I think he was the loveliest man. And the interesting thing here was a lot of people spoke excellent English. So he told me about his life and how he saw his world in the future. So that's just 2 or 3 of them. I have brought along this to show you. These are all quite big paintings. The other person was Farida, the flower seller. She had no hope of getting married because she was too old at 20. And so she sold flowers. And she sat for me twice, actually. So after that, I decided I had about 27, 30 big paintings. I would have an exhibition. And I was talking to someone within the embassy about what I was doing. They asked about my paintings and so forth. And I said I thought I'd have an exhibition. So along with Standard Chartered Bank, the EU Commission arranged for a publisher to publish the book of my exhibition. And that too would be sales to give back. So I told all the artists that if I sold their painting, I would give them 15% of the sales and invited them to this exhibition. So they had a ball, they all turned up. Naturally, all the paintings sold except for one. Nobody liked the young mullah. So if there's anybody that's hanging out for a young mullah painting, I still have one at home. So that was, after that, we had a discussion about, we've come to the end of, I guess, traipsing around the developing world. We would decide where we were going to live. And it took a while. 10 years isn't that long, is it? But no, we did finally get there, and here am I in Scotland. And I chose Edinburgh. Graham is from Aberdeen, my husband, so we were here for the family. We zipped backwards and forwards, and I had to choose somewhere to live. But Edinburgh captured my heart. I think Edinburgh is one of the best small cities in the entire world, and I think I'm really lucky to be here, and I have been here now almost 10 years, and I've enjoyed every single moment of it, except for some of the summers, but we won't go there. So a little bit about my work. Okay, this was written sometime, and I think it's an amalgamation of something I have said and it's been written on my behalf. I think it actually captures possibly what I would want to say if I just looked at you all. So I'm going to say this. While travelling through an often wet and wild Scottish landscape, I am captivated by the glimpses of light piercing through the clouds and bouncing off the misty corners of lochs and hills. The light is fleeting, but at the same time uplifting, momentary and yet timeless. I was inspired to try to capture these ethereal moments. It's impossible to work outdoors to capture this phenomenon, so I spend days with eyes, watching, soaking up the vistas, taking thousands of photographs. I then go back, I bring a sketchbook with me. I use those for colour notes for the seasons as they change. The colours of the land are reflected back into the clouds in an interactive play of sky, land and water. The clouds providing a reflective surface which photographs of course don't often capture. I also follow the change of seasons. So the great oranges in the paintings that you see here are often the autumn and the spring as they come out of their various seasons. And anybody that's lived in this part of the world or in Edinburgh know as the sun grows low, the colour of the vistas are actually bright orange. Beautiful. Back in my studio with all my notebooks, I work with oil paints on large canvases. Bigger the better. My only restriction is getting them through the door or sometimes lifts. The larger the better to capture the awesome vistas on offer. Practicalities of space are my only limit. I paint in oils for permanence, but my technique is built on a long life experience with watercolours, which has enabled me to develop an oil technique using transparent layers of washes that build up colour, adding luminescent and transparency to some of my paintings. For a long time I also did commissions, and so I've had some fabulous commissions. One of them was, my brief was, and he was lovely, he owned a house in Newtown, and the top of it had a big cupola, a very huge one, and it had almost a mezzanine floor, a circular piece to it. And he said, I work in London, and he said, I wished I could stay here in Edinburgh all the time. And he said, I want a painting up there that, he says, my only brief to you is hope. So, yeah, it's easy, right? Yeah. And he said, I want to walk out of here on a Monday, and he said, I want to look at the painting, go to London, come back, and I will look at it, and he said, I had a smile in my heart. So I painted him a great, big, huge, bright orange sunrise, right? And we barely got it through the door, we barely got it up the stairs. It took ages to sort of like hang the thing. I wasn't there for this. I'm working now through our galleries. It's very rare I meet clients, and this was one of the best things I've done for a long time. I should say the galleries that I work with have been fabulous for me. And I have had many commissions. I found during lockdown, an awful lot of people rang me up and said, I know you're not doing anything for the next year, but we've been thinking about this painting, right? I like this one, so they would send me a copy of it, and I would say, okay, it's part of a series. And so during lockdown, I actually painted away. And so my lockdown was busy, really busy. So that is a little story about me. I'll probably finish up by saying some of my influences were, I don't know if anybody knows John Ruskin, he's an English writer, okay, and he writes about skies in a way that almost no one else writes about skies. And he talks about us as people relating to skies. And of course, along with John Ruskin, we have the poet Ravi Burns, who talks fabulously about the landscape and the skies of Scotland, along with Percy Shelley. I just use this as an example. He wrote The Cloud, and he writes about the sanguine sunrise with its meteor eyes. And so that's your homework, you can get to go and look it up. So I would like to close and say, if you see my world as I see it, I will have achieved much in my work. Thank you.
Oh, good. Do any of you have any questions for Trina?
Yes.
So, everywhere that you've lived over the years, your style has changed then, obviously, because very much, to me, it sounds like, you've been in Jakarta, graphic design, and then portrait when you were in Bangladesh war, and then Scotland is skies. Do you think there's a reason behind it, or is it just what at the time fitted your environment?
I think what happens is, like most artists, you gather information as you move along in your world. You pick up things, you drop things, ideas, thoughts, and so forth. My world, in a graphic design world, which I'm still attracted to, if I see a design on a small box or a canvas, I think, oh gosh, that's good. So I'm still there, but it has hard edges. Okay. So when I talked about the temples and their kind of ethereal smokes, has anyone been to Bali? No? Okay. It's a very, very beautiful place, very spiritual place too, I might add. And so the temples are filled with incense and candles, fire. So the whole thing is one of smoke. And so I learned I taught myself to try and capture that feeling of being in a temple. So I've carried that with me as well. My graphic design gives me a sense of design. So my paintings are actually designed. When my notebooks actually are filled up with a design that's correct before I start painting, because it's not about to be corrected. So I think, just between you and me, I've got a little older, I think I've got quite a bit of background knowledge as I've come along with my life. So yes, I do. I think even today, even now, I look at other people's work, I'm on social media, and I think, gosh, I've forgotten how gorgeous those greens are. I don't paint in green, so I'll give it a shot because I'm in lockdown, and so I'll do some little paintings in green. So I think most artists are like it. You're just perpetually moving along. Yes.
You use thirds, don't you?
Yes. Yes, we do.
Yeah. It's lovely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Akikabal. Bagaimana? Yeah, where are you from?
Edinburgh.
Okay.
I noticed most of in fact all your pictures have seascapes as well. Where do you find, where are the best skies? Is it over the sea, or do you find them sort of in the Highlands or anything like that?
My first exhibition came from Graham took me, he said, well, if we're going to see everywhere, then you should understand what Scotland looks like. So we were travelling. We went right up to Betty Hill, to Land's End, went in through all those big peatlands and so forth. And part of that, on that particular occasion, was the skies were thunderous and torrential. So mostly I was out of the car, lying on the peat, taking all these photographs of the skies and so forth. And so my first exhibition, believe it or not, was over the southern peatlands with big skies. And believe it or not, I sold all of the paintings to mostly to people in Scotland who said, I know where you are. Right. And believe it or not, they bought a painting to hang in their house. I was quite impressed by this. The skies come and go. Of course, you know, in the Western Isles, during the change of season, it's spectacular out over the sea. But then I have a great fondness for bogs, mud, and soggy underfoot as well. I think the best, it's hard to say, but when the skies are right, no matter if they're over the sea or over the land, the reflections that come down into the land that pick up the water are as spectacular as if they're over the water. So I really can't answer your question, except that so it's as everywhere I go is seasonal. Yeah. The second exhibition I did was, I was greatly intrigued by all of the beautiful, the grasslands, the heather, and I came to understand, once we started on all this, of course, you're like somebody buries down in it, you go and find out that all actual heather is seasonal and it changes colour and so forth. So I like that. And so my paintings then, the foregrounds all represented some of the seasonal colours shown.
Yeah.
It's fine, yeah, Dunderbutt.
Sorry?
Dunderbutt.
Yes.
What is the largest size you've done?
Oh, as I said, I have to get it out the door. That was a 3.2. Yeah, that was that. Oh yes, no, that was the height of it, and then it was like 4 something. Yeah, and I had a ball. I loved doing that. That was great. Yeah.
Now, how long will it take you?
Aha. There we go. The $90 questions. How long does it take? If we're in a good, if the canvas and I are in a good place, right, 3 months maybe. I put a load of paint on, right, and then a lot of the times I wait for it to dry before I go back in. And if I'm putting on transparent colours as well, I'm building up all the time. But if we've fallen out, it spends its life with its face to the wall until we start speaking again. It could be another couple of months before I look at it. Because if you turn it around and look at it, you might think, well, actually, you're all right, actually. Yeah, it was me, it's my fault. We'll get along fine now.
Yeah.
Do you have lots of rejects? Which is like you started the project and you don't like it, you just toss it?
Never. I never give up. Even if I do start again, I'm using the same canvas. Of course, there's stops and starts. There are some where I think the colour and I aren't getting along, or it's the end of a series, and I feel like I've worked it through and I was wrong to push it for one more painting, because what's happening is I'm already thinking about the next series that I'm doing. I've been somewhere else, and like a magpie I picked up a new idea, and so if your heart's not in it,
So you have always more than one on the go?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
If something actually takes my fancy, like Belgon Ponds, this is one of them. I did about 4 or 5 of them. And they're all different sizes, and I wanted to work through an idea. I fell in love with the ponds. I love the idea of them, but I wasn't sure that I was actually going to capture exactly what I wanted to. So the bigger ones I worked together, yes.
Are they all at different times of the day? Because they all look such crepuscular light that, that it's the gloaming.
Yes.
But, is that just Scotland?
Nothing to do with me.
He's August.
Yeah. Yes,
I know.
Thank you. Good point.
Yeah.
There is my August sky up there.
Yeah.
And the worst thing that can happen to me is the middle of winter because it goes pale blue. The sky is just pale blue for days on end.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, okay, come on, you're being boring.
Yeah.
Move on.
You must have to wait because as I came up on the train today, it was just grey.
Yeah.
There was no definition
No.
at all.
Not at all. Talk about flat.
Really flat, yeah. Okay.
Do you teach?
No, I do not teach. I run a configurative drawing group in the city. I'm the person that puts it together and runs it. It's for already established artists. But if anybody was interested in painting, I know a swathe of people who do actually teach, and they teach many subjects as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Trina.
Can I ask, do you paint the edges?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Mm.
Is that with tape or not?
No,
No.
it's not.
No.
It's. I know there's two schools of thought here. One is leaves them white, and the other is leaves
Yeah.
them dark. For a big painting like that one up there,
Yeah.
I like it's dark because
Yeah.
it actually has a nice clean edge
Yeah.
to it. And also people who are kind of wondering whether or not to frame, it gives them a starting point to be able
Yeah.
to say that's where the painting actually ends.
Ends. I
Yes.
agree. I do the same. I do black.
Yes.
All the
and
time,
that's-
yeah.
Okay, thank you, Trina. I have one question. How did you develop your unique technique?
My oils. Okay. Trial and error. The countries that I've lived in don't necessarily have the best kind of, or let's put it this way, they have lesser brand names than what you find in Europe. So I started there. I would say that coming here, when I did come here, we belonged to the EU and the world was my oyster, to be perfectly honest, when it came to paints from Europe and Britain and so forth. How do I develop my technique? A lot of it is, if you look at my drawing, look at my paintings, you'll see that they are structured, and that comes from my graphic design. The other part of it is just experimenting, painting until I feel something is working for me. I don't normally paint, for example, foliage, but during lockdown, I quite got into it. There was in the gardens close by, there was a big har that came in, and the whole thing became just this misty, ethereal thing that just drifted over all of the greenery. And there was something called a Kifsgate rose that fell down from, it's way up, I believe it's a rambler, it's way up there. So you wouldn't know it's the Kifsgate rose by in a million years. It's just a little whiteness in the dark greens and then the mist coming through it. And I taught myself that whilst I was in lockdown. So trial and error, I think, is a good answer. I read furiously. I'm online. Anybody that has actually understood how far we've come for learning or teaching yourself anything, right? All you have to do is go online to understand that everybody in my world has an opinion about the best thing, the best way to go and do it. There's also a mile of information on referencing as well. Who's a good teacher, who's not, whose work's good to look at, who's generous with their ideas and tips and so forth. It's a great world for the most part.
Okay, well, thank you, Trina.
Well done. That's great. Interesting.
So we're going to stop and have a break for 10 minutes, and we'll be back at 8:05.
7. 7?
That's 7.
Yeah.